Gone Fishing by James H. Schmitz, Section 5. The end of Year 5. For some hours, the Association's Antiplano station had been dark and almost deserted. Only the IMT transit lock beneath one of the sprawling ranch houses showed in the vague light spreading out of the big scanning plate in an upper wall section. The plate framed an unimpressive section of the galaxy, a blurred scattering of stars condensing toward the right, and somewhat left of center, a large misty red globe. John Emanuel Fredericks, seated by himself in one of the two tube operator chairs, ignored the plate. He was stooped slightly forwards, peering absorbedly through the eyepieces of the operator's scanner before him. Melvin Sims, psychologist, strolled in presently through the transit lock's door, stopped behind Fredericks, remarking mildly, "Good evening, Doctor." Fredericks started and looked around. "Never heard you arrive, Mel. Where's Ollie?" "He and Spaulding dropped in at Spaulding's place in Vermont. They should be along in a few minutes." "Spaulding?" Fredericks repeated inquiringly. "Our revered president intends to observe the results of Ollie's experiment in person?" "He'll represent the board here," Sims said, "whereas I, as you may have guessed, represent the outraged psychology department." He nodded at the plate. "Is that the place?" "That's it. ET Base 18. "Not very sharp in the tube, is it?" "No. Still plenty of interfering radiation, but it's thinned out enough for contact. Reading is .19 as of 30 minutes ago. Fredericks indicated the chair beside him. "Sit down if you want a better look." "Thanks." The psychologist settled himself in the chair, leaned forward, and peered into the scanner. After a few seconds, he remarked, "Not the most hospitable-looking place." Fredericks grunted. "Any of the ecologists will tell you 18's an unspoiled beauty. No problems there, except the ones we bring along ourselves." Sims grinned faintly. "Well, we're good at doing that, aren't we? Have you looked around for McAllen's subject yet?" "No. Felt Ollie should be present when we find out what's happened. Incidentally, how did the meeting go?" "You weren't tuned in?" Sims asked, surprised. "No, too busy setting things up for contact." "Well," Sims sat back in his chair, "I may say it was a regular bear garden for a while, Doctor. Psychology expressed itself as being astounded, indignant, offended. In a word, they were hopping mad. I kept out of it, though I admit I was startled when McAllen informed me privately this morning of the 5-year project he'd been conducting on the quiet. He was accused of crimes ranging, from the clandestine to the inhumane. And of course, Ollie was giving it back as good as he got." "Of course." "His arguments," Sims went on, pursing his lips reflexively, "were not without merit. That was recognized. Nobody enjoys the idea of euthanasia as a security device. Many of us feel, I do, that it's still preferable to the degree of brainwashing required to produce significant alterations in a personality type of Shard's class." "Ollie feels that too," Frederick said. "The upshot of the original situation as he saw it was that Barney Shard had been a dead man from the moment he got on the association's trail, or a permanently deformed personality." Sims shook his head. "Not the last. We wouldn't have considered attempting personality alteration in his case." "Euthanasia, then," Frederick said. "Shard was too intelligent to be thrown off the track, much too unscrupulous to be trusted under any circumstances, so Ollie reported him dead." The psychologist was silent for some seconds. "The point might be this," he said suddenly. "After my talk with McAllen this morning, I ran an extrapolation on the personality pattern defined for Shard 5 years ago on the basis of his background. Results indicate he went insane and suicided within a year." "How reliable are those results?" Frederick inquired absently. "No more so than any other indication in individual psychology, but they present a reasonable probability, and not a very pleasant one." Frederick said, "Oliver wasn't unaware of that as a possible outcome." One reason he selected base 18 for the experiment was to make sure he couldn't interfere with the process once it had begun. His feeling, after talking with Shard for some hours, was that Shard was an overcondensed man. That is Oliver's own term, you understand. Shard obviously was intelligent, had a very strong survival drive. He had selected a good personal survival line to follow. Good, but very narrow. Actually, of course, he was a frightened man. He had been running scared all his life. He couldn't stop. Sims nodded. Base 18 stopped him. The things he'd been running from simply no longer existed. Ollie believed Shard would go into a panic when he realized it. The question was what he'd do then. Survival now had a very different aspect. The only dangers threatening him were the ones inherent in the rigid personality structure he had maintained throughout his adult existence. Would he be intelligent enough to understand that? And would his survival urge, with every alternative absolutely barred to him for 5 years, be strong enough to overcome those dangers? And there, Sims said dryly, we have 2 rather large questions. He cleared his throat. The fact remains, however, that Oliver B. McCallan is a good practical psychologist, as he demonstrated at the meeting. I expected Ollie would score on the motions, Frederick said. How did that part of it come off? Not too badly. The first motion was passed unanimously, a vote of censure against Dr. McNallan. Fredericks looked thoughtful. His 17th, I believe. Yes, that fact was mentioned. McCallan admitted that he could do no less than vote for this one himself. However, the next motion to receive a majority was, in effect, a generalized agreement that men with such highly specialized skills as Barney Shard's and with comparable intelligence actually would be of great value as members of the association, if it turned out that they could be sufficiently relieved of their more flagrant antisocial tendencies. Considering the qualification, the psychology department could hardly avoid backing that motion. The same with the third one. In effect, again, that psychology is to make an unprejudiced study of the results of Dr. McCallan's experiment on base 18 and report on the desirability of similar experiments when the personality of future subjects appears to warrant them. Well, Frederick said after a pause, as far as the association goes, Ollie got what he wanted. As usual. He hesitated. The other matter? We'll know that shortly. Sims turned his head to listen, added in a lowered voice, They're coming now. Dr. Stephen Spaulding said to Sims and Fredericks, Dr. McCallan agrees with me that the man we shall be looking for on base 18 may be dead. If this is indicated, we'll attempt to find some evidence of his death before normal ecological operations on 18 are resumed. Next, we may find him alive, but no longer sane. Dr. Sims and I are both equipped with drug guns, which will then be used to render him insensible. The charge is sufficient to ensure he will not wake up again. In this circumstance, caution will be required since he was left on the base with a loaded gun. Third, he may be alive and technically sane, but openly or covertly hostile to us. Spaulding glanced briefly at each of the others and then went on. It is because of this particular possibility that our contact group here has been very carefully selected. If such has been the result of Dr. McCallan's experiment, it will be our disagreeable duty to act as Shard's executioners. To add lifelong confinement or further psychological manipulation to the 5 solitary years Shard has already spent would be inexcusable. Dr. McCallan has told us he did not inform Shard of the actual reason he was being marooned. On the very good grounds, McCallan interrupted, that if Shard had been told at the onset what the purpose was, he would have preferred killing himself to allowing the purpose to be achieved. Any other human being was Shard's antagonist. It would have been impossible for him to comply with another man's announced intentions. Sims nodded. I'll go along with that point, Doctor. Spaulding resumed. It might be a rather immaterial point by now. In any event, Shard's information was that an important 5-year plan of the association made it necessary to restrict him for that length of time. We shall observe him closely. If the indications are that he would act against the association whenever he is given the opportunity, our line will be that the 5-year plan has been concluded and that he is therefore now to be released and will receive adequate compensation for his enforced seclusion. As soon as he is asleep, he will, of course, receive euthanasia. But up to that time, everything must be done to reassure him. He paused again, concluded. There is the final possibility that Dr. McCallan's action has had the results he was attempting to bring about. Ollie, you might speak on that yourself. McCallan shrugged. I've already presented my views. Essentially, it's a question of whether Barney Shard was capable of learning that he could live without competing destructively with other human beings. If he has grasped that, he should also be aware by now that Base 18 is presently one of the most interesting spots in the known universe. Sims asked, Do you expect he'll be grateful for what has occurred? Well, McCallan said judiciously, turning a little pale, that, of course, depends on whether he is still alive and sane. But if he has survived the 5 years, I do believe that he will not be dissatisfied with what has happened to him. However, he shrugged again, let's get ahead with it. 5 years has been a long time to find out whether or not I've murdered a man. In the momentary silence that followed, he seated himself in the chair Fredericks had vacated and glanced over at Sims. You stay seated, Mel, he said. You represent psychology here. Use your chair scanner. The plate's still showing no indications of clearing, John? No, said Fredericks. In another 2 hours, we might have a good picture there. Hardly before. McCallan said, We won't wait for it. Sims and I can determine through the scanners approximately what has been going on. He was silent for a few seconds. Then the blurred red globe in the plate expanded swiftly, filled 2/3 of the view space, checked for a moment, then grew once more, finally stopped. McCallan said irritably, John, I'm afraid you're going to have to take over. My hands don't seem steady enough to handle this properly. A minute or two passed. The big plate grew increasingly indistinct, all details lost in a muddy wash of orange-brown shades. Green intruded suddenly. Then McCallan muttered, Picking up the cabin now. There was a moment of silence. Then Fredericks cleared his throat. So far so good, Oliver. We're looking into the cabin. Can't see your man yet, but someone's living there. Sims? Obviously, the psychologist acknowledged. He hesitated. And at a guess, it's no maniac. The place is in reasonably good order. You say Shard isn't in the cabin? Spaulding demanded. Fredericks said, Not unless he's deliberately concealing himself. The exit door is open. Well, the place isn't entirely deserted after all. What do you mean? Asked Spaulding. Couple of squirrels sitting in the window, Sims explained. In the window? Inside the cabin? Yes, said Fredericks. Either they strayed in while he was gone, or he's keeping them as pets. Now, should we start looking around outside for Shard? No, Spaulding decided. The base is too big to attempt to cover at pinpoint focus. If he's living in the cabin and has simply gone out, he'll return within a few hours at most. We'll wait and see what we can deduce from the way he behaves when he shows up. He turned to McCallan. Ollie, he said, I think you might allow yourself to relax just a little. This doesn't seem bad at all. McCallan grunted. I don't know, he said. You're overlooking one thing. What's that? I told Shard when to expect us. Unless he smashed the clock, he knows we're due today. If nothing's wrong, wouldn't he be waiting in the cabin for us? Spaulding hesitated. That is a point. He seems to be hiding out. May have prepared an ambush, for that matter, John? Yes, Fredericks said. Step the tube scope down as fine as it will go and scan that cabin as if you were vacuuming it. There may be some indication. He's already doing that, Sims interrupted. There was silence again for almost 2 minutes. Forefinger and thumb of Frederick's right hand moved with infinite care on a set of dials on the side of the scanner. Otherwise, neither he nor Sims stirred. "Oh!" Dr. John Frederick suddenly cried. "Oh, a message, Ollie. Your Mr. Shard has left you a message." For a moment, McAllen couldn't see clearly through the scanner. Fredericks was still laughing. Sims was saying in a rapid voice, "It's quite all right, Doctor, quite all right. Your man's sane, quite sane. In fact, you've made, one might guess, a 100% convert to the McAllen approach to life. Can't you see it?" "No," gasped McAllen. He had a vague impression of the top of the desk in the main room of the cabin, of something white. A white card taped to it? Of blurred printing on the card? "Nothing's getting that boy unduly excited anymore." Sim's voice went on beside him. "Not even the prospect of seeing visitors from Earth for the first time in 5 years. But he's letting you know it's perfectly all right to make yourself at home in his cabin until he gets back. Here, let me." He reached past McAllen, adjusted the scanner. The printing on the card swam suddenly into focus before McAllen's eyes. The message was terse, self-explanatory, to the point. "Gone fishing. Regards, B. Shard." The end. End of section 5. End of Gone Fishing by James H. Schmitz.